Just as there are patterns of weather leading up to storms, the increase of humidity is a great example. The wind picking up gusts, clouds looking more heavy and dark. There are indicators in our lives that something needs to change. And when we understand what is happening early on, we can glide through these changes gracefully. I remember being in my old life and standing in a mutual friend's house, gathering for a party. And I looked out the window. There was no storm. I actually don't think I could see the sky. I just saw the fence. And I felt so disconnected from everybody there, even though this was my life, even though the structure is what on paper was supposed to make me happy. And I smiled and I went back to fill my drink or my plate, and I socialized with people. And I don't think that anybody was none the wiser about how out of place and hollow I felt. It was almost as though I was pretending, but I didn't know that I was pretending. All I knew is that I had this deep feeling of listlessness, restlessness, a desire to break free, but I didn't know what I was struggling to break free from because I had it all. And instead, this hollowness kept building and building, where I looked at the social structures of the life that I had created, and I felt that everything was routine and disconnected. And we all went about our days and our lives, and we participated in entertainment and activities, and we told jokes and we told stories and we debated politics, especially in the DC area. And we expanded our minds and our thoughts, and we did so in little tiny containers that were very, very safe. We followed the social protocols and the social mores. Some of us even got dogs and had children. And yet, underneath it all, there was this feeling, for me at least, even though I was connecting with my core group of friends, there was this feeling that something was missing and something was wrong in my life. This was the prelude to this storm of dissonance that I find to be quite accurate for people that are about to embark on a major life path shift. But where things get interesting for you, perhaps, my dear listener, and perhaps not, is when we don't see the source of our suffering as a call to change. Instead, we see it as a reminder that we are stuck and we are trapped. And the number of people that I speak to that feel stuck and trapped by the circumstances of their life is really, really common, actually. It's actually more common than I think people talk about. I have people that reach out to me that are married and have fallen in love with somebody else because their soul is yearning for something different. But the confines of their life, the trappings of this beautiful existence that they built, that they thought that they wanted and thought was the happily ever after, something isn't fully complete in it. It isn't fully right. So they find their hearts or their souls pulling in another direction. And some of these listeners are really gentle-hearted, kind people that want to do the right thing, but they feel stuck between a rock and a hard place. And when you have the soul that pulls you and the heart that guides you, it creates this feeling of misalignment that can precipitate this horrific feeling of almost like an internal collapse. It is a prison of its own making, the mind creating this construct of happiness, checking the boxes, and the heart and the soul vacuuming away from it, begging in some cases, yearning in other cases, or brimming with this deep disappointment that something needs to be fixed but can't be fixed where the mind wants it to be fixed. It's actually rather complex. People have different presentations. But for this moment, I'd like to call your attention to a time in your life where before you were on the cusp of change, just think back for a moment, the months or the years leading up. What was your emotional experience like? How did you know you needed to leave? How did you know you needed to ask for something to be different so you could stay? That right there, that nagging pain, that lingering suffering, that quibbling dissonance is a very particular vibration that when, like a thread, you start to pull on it in your memories, what you'll find is that it is a very potent guiding light. But a lot of people try to ignore it or bury it. And when they do so, it actually creates a delay because of the stagnation. And the gravity of the stagnation creates resistance in the person to actually fulfilling any sort of change. And this is when sometimes, and not all the time, the universe can step in on your behalf, particularly if your journey is guided, if it's overseen, if you have a date with destiny, and you have a spiritual entourage team that's looking out for you, then the universe will come and make sure that you collapse the things that need to be collapsed in your life. Tarot card readers call this a tower moment, where there is this big disruption to help get you to where you need to go. But sometimes in the moment, it can be quite challenging, to say the least. Unexpected job losses, breakups, financial setbacks. I knew of a person who their house burned down. They actually lost everything and fled the country. Not really fled per se, but that precipitated a move out of the country where they settled into a new life and still live there today. And I think it's been 30 years, give or take. So these disrupting events can actually be quite traumatic for us, unless we see that preceding them, we actually weren't happy, we actually were asking for change. We were asking for a novel solution to present itself. And when we surrender into that feeling of dissonance, when we recognize it early on, and we understand that it's actually trying to get us to reconfigure something in our lives. It doesn't always mean walking away, by the way, but sometimes it means changing things around and having a conversation that needs to be had that will bring you more joy in your life, that will lead to the change that you need in order to harness the experience that you are hoping to achieve. And perhaps you don't need it, right? Perhaps you have most of your needs met, but it might make a really big difference in the long term. And so that feeling of dissonance is what creates the momentum inside to actually face things and to recognize that something needs to change. It is your soul's calling you, asking you to change. You, as a captain of your ship, your avatar, and your reality, you have the power to actually shift things dramatically on the order of minutes to hours. Sometimes it can take days to weeks, but with micro decisions, you can put into action that which you need to actually put into action. And the way you know that you're going in the right direction is by the amount of relief that you feel. I remember a long, long time ago, I was very, very young, and I was in a relationship that wasn't right for me. And I didn't know it because I didn't have a lot of experience, because on the surface, everything looked great. But they wanted me to marry them and to turn into this person that I wasn't. And my soul really wanted me to go to school and wanted me to have my own independence. And even though they were a wonderful caretaker and their family was very supportive, I just felt this gnawing feeling as our commitment grew that it wasn't right for me. And I remember talking to them about getting a job, and that created this disconnect between us. Like the very thought of me working was somehow disruptive to their well-being, which really concerned me because I wanted to explore the world. I had virtually no experience doing so, and I wanted these experiences of working and going to school, and they wanted to take care of everything. And so this feeling and this weight grew on me until I would take these really long walks and I would listen to music, and the lyrics started speaking to me. And I would just listen to the same group over and over until I could really make sense of what was happening inside, because at that time I didn't have a concept of a soul. I just knew something wasn't feeling right. And so I would just walk and listen. And finally, there was a song about freedom. And the way I felt, I even still feel it right now. I have chills thinking back to this moment. The way I felt then was I needed to go to the path of freedom. And I didn't know what that looked like, but I knew that the relationship that I was considering was not that. And it had nothing to do with my love for that person, or even our compatibility in many areas. It had more to do with that I was being called in a different direction. And so when we have these feelings of dissonance, it is an invitation to make changes. So I almost immediately went back when I recognized what I needed to do. I went back to said boyfriend/fiance, and I told him that I needed to break up. It didn't go over so well. So we did a trial separation, and I moved out of the state, out of his family's home. And I didn't find independence for a long time. And there were some challenges and obstacles that were very disruptive in my life. The universe was helping to get me to where I needed to go, but it crushed my soul in a couple of different moments. But then I emerged actually a better person. And the breakup was really hard on him, but it wasn't hard on me because I could feel that I was moving in the right direction, even if I didn't have everything sorted out, and I did not. I could just feel that the path to freedom I was embarking on, so that temporary separation turned into a permanent separation. And looking back now, decades later, I'm so grateful that I listened, because that feeling and that invitation and hitting the exit button and making the changes in my life, even though it was incredibly tenuous and uncertain and dark at times, not related to him, but just other things that I would end up going through, that was the ultimate path to freedom. And so by working with the discomfort that many people drink to avoid, or gamble, or shop, or turn to adult entertainment relentlessly to escape the nagging feeling that there's something that's not adding up in their lives. And like a salve that's temporary and a balm that is ultimately ineffective, we fall into these consciousness traps of not recognizing that feeling that we're hiding from, that we're running from, that we are afraid to confront is actually a best friend in disguise. And you don't have to have it mapped out to be able to make that change. All you have to do is to know that a change needs to be made.